Hey everybody, this is Peter Joseph, April 29th, 2015. Hope everyone's doing great out there. Let's see here. I'm just going to jump right into something that people have been asking a lot of questions about, which was detailed in an email that was sent out to the movement last week. By the way, if you're not getting emails, please let us know, because we've had a massive problem with people polluting the email database and reporting different domains and things where basically things just go to spam. And it's not just some casual spam thing. There's been a deliberate, malicious manipulation and reporting that's happened, and it's actually pretty horrible. And we've had a few technicians confirm this, but we're cleaning it up. It was moved to a new server. So if you're signed up for the mailing list, please double check that you're receiving this, and at a minimum mark your things not spam if they are spam. But send an email to media@thezeitgeistmovement.com if you are getting these things in spam, and denote which email service you're using. That would be very helpful to us to start to clean this up. It's really quite frustrating. The Zeitgeist Movement has over 530,000 emails. It's an incredible database that we very conservatively send out to, and when we do, we hope for a response, but our response has been terrible because of these spam filters. Anyway, if you receive that email, you will notice it says something about an introductory 501c3 nonprofit that the Zeitgeist Movement is in preliminary development. This has been a very hesitant move. If anyone knows me, I've been completely against any type of monetary association with the movement since its inception over 6-7 years ago. And I have basically subsidized or underwritten pretty much everything on the global administrative level, if you will, main events and the like, myself for the most part over the course of the years, which of course has been very difficult, very trying, but I've done it out of complete goodwill and hope that this type of grassroots initiative can have the type of legs that it needs without the interest of any kind of donations or the like. But after many conversations over the course of the years and some pretty detailed ones in Berlin regarding the establishment of a 501c3 nonprofit and how that can help very basic features of the movement, including chapter infrastructure, including press engagement. I mean, if you want to get on shows that are high profile, which many people talk about, we need to get the Zeitgeist Movement on this show with Larry King or Bill Maher or what have you. They don't just pick people at random. You have to have a press relationship. You have to have a representative. These are things that we've kind of avoided, and the beauty of it is that the movement has done so much without any type of professional engagement. And I think people out there forget how incredibly productive and successful the movement's been with an absolutely grassroots foundation. It's truly profound. But we've hit a glass ceiling, and I've been talking about this with many once again, and it's time to break through that glass ceiling. There are many basic administrative and communicative things that, with a little bit of funding, could do a whole lot for the Zeitgeist Movement. As of right now, everything is maintained by volunteers and by those willing to put up the funds for different forms of changes. We have the hard costs, and I'll just be honest with all of you. The 2014 hard costs for the basic website administration and outlay and fees and domains and everything else comes to over $6,000, and that comes out of somebody's pocket. That's not just out of thin air. Then there's the entire media administration infrastructure that's required to maintain all of the websites, the Zeitgeist Movement, the Zeitgeist Movement's forum, the blog, TZM chapters, the Zeitgeist Media Project, TZM Global, the Zeitgeist Media Festival, and so on. There's also constant administration of the mailing list, Blog Talk Radio, TeamSpeak, our new smartphone application, which will require constant updates, and of course basic volunteer administration of social network stuff, which obviously is mostly volunteer, but every now and again something costs money to do, such as promotions and the like. I'm not justifying that they always work, but you get the point. It's a possibility for extending ourselves. And of course there's the main events, Zeitgeist Day main event and Zeitgeist Media Festival. Zeitgeist Media Festival has been a very expensive thing to do for the main event. And the Zeitgeist Day usually takes the burden is usually taken by the local chapter. We'd like to eliminate that and to be able to actually fund out and maybe even make Zeitgeist Day free and actually have a real press relationship. If you wonder why Zeitgeist Days don't get as much press as they should, is because there's nobody working to generate press. at least in a professional sense. The very first Zeitgeist Day, where the New York Times came, they only came because I paid about $2,000 to $4,000, I don't even remember now, to get a press agent to promote the event. So this is the world we live in, as painful as it is. It's a money-driven culture. And again, I fight this the entire way, but it's if we're going to take the movement seriously, we're going to have to snap out of this, and we're going to have to start being as proactive as possible about extending the message of the movement, especially in the climate that's emerged. I wouldn't be pushing so hard if I felt that things were kind of turning the other direction, that, okay, yeah, we can improve society, but society's improving a little bit now, so I guess we can just subside. Maybe we're too early with the Zeitgeist movement. Maybe it's just not time for this type of improvement. But that's exactly the opposite of what's happening. Everywhere you look, everything the movement's been talking about since day one has been validated as far as the problem, and everything progressive that's happening has an undertone of the Zeitgeist movement as its elemental solution. I'm not saying that people are listening to the movement. I'm saying that the fundamental logic of what comprises future sustainability and the necessity for efficiency is rising up on its own. The train of thought's being slowly realized by even commercial institutions. Well, very few of them, but you see it. And the different revolutions in vertical farming, 3D printing, different applications of materials, this push. Even the Pope recently came out with a big thing in Rome about the need to be more sustainable and fight climate change, and the meeting with the scientists and the religious faction is pretty historic, in fact, if you didn't see that new thing with the Pope. Punch it up. But anyway, so everything's pointing towards this. And believe me, I would have dropped this like a hot potato long ago. There's too much misery associated with attempting an activist organization of this nature. And anyone that's been close to me and people that I know very well know that you just get burnt out so easily, and you're fighting a uphill battle that looks like everything is an avalanche against you. But with the truth be told, everything is pointing in our direction. And if we keep pushing forward, the Zeitgeist movement is finally going to break that glass ceiling and open up an incredibly overdue conversation with the vast majority of the people out there that will finally figure out that you cannot have the social system in play today and expect any type of sustainable or humane society to flourish. So coming back to the nonprofit, there's an administrative side to it that will assist, again, chapter infrastructure technically through websites and the like, assist event days, and assist the maintaining and improvement of all of the sites and basic social networking and lots of other things of that nature. There is, of course, the press issue I mentioned before, which is very, very important, something I think might benefit the movement more than anything else in this list that I'm putting forward, regarding simply breaking through and getting the mainstream, forcing the mainstream, given again, everything we're talking about is on the tip of everyone's tongues. I mean, they just 0.2% of the population, roughly 600 families, got a tax break. The upper 0.2% got a tax break of over $250 billion. Just think about, with this inequality crisis, not to mention the grand social instability out there, the smack in the face to the general public, the profound distortion of thought, the twisted logic that gravitates, well, that embraces the elite, that defines them in this strange bubble they exist in, and of course the U.S. government that represents the elite. So anyway, that's U.S. news, of course, but this type of stuff is happening all over the world in different ways and in different extremes. So funding more productive press mechanisms, and even maybe putting forward resources to help promote the Zeitgeist Movement book, to provide campaigns for any kind of media that we output, to get C-SPAN or some actual news channel to run an entire Z-Day program. These things are not out of the question whatsoever. It just takes that type of initiative. So these are all the things that are on the table. Other issues. Legal issues. Part of the fund will go towards legal. This is critically important, again, as much as we want to have the cognitive dissonance of anything associated with this system, because it's all corrupt from top to bottom, the entire socioeconomic political institution. But we're trapped inside of it, and therefore we have to use it to some effect. That is the ultimate hypocrisy of any social activism of this nature. It's just the way it is. So everyone get used to that. The legal issue is very important. We've had ongoing harassment and astroturfing and pretty dark and dismal online type of response, and this feedback loop which is, for example, ever present in the current state of the Zeitgeist movement's Wikipedia page. A very strategic astroturfing campaign put forward that collapsed the entire film trilogy, which of course has little to do with the movement in any kind of functionality or representation, and then stuck the movement inside of it in the guise of one word: conspiracy. Which, of course, is pathetic. But the sad thing is, it actually works out there. You get some right-wing article, you get some right-wing writer that's writing an article about the Zeitgeist movement. He's already apprehensive because he sees some kind of communist overtone. He goes to Wikipedia and he sees, oh my God, it's all about conspiracy. And he's fulfilled in his interest to look for something negative. And Wikipedia is perfect for that, which is why it works so well as an astroturfing platform. And that is the new Orwellian playground, Wikipedia. Anyway, so I guess what was my point? Countering these types of things, you need positive press to come forward. We need larger mainstream press to actually represent what the movement is and not let this noise that's being thrown at the movement continue to persist. And we also, as an aside, people need to step forward and actively work to counter that Wikipedia page. It's truly horrendous. Actually, one strength, before I forget, about the NPO, which is worth mentioning, is that it's actually a legal entity. It's actually an entity that's traditionally respected. Up until now, the Zeitgeist movement hasn't had an actual entity. It's a grassroots organization, loosely knit. There's no real established title for such a thing because it doesn't have one. It's different if you're something like Occupy, where Occupy was so enormous in the stint that it had that it created a name for itself and is permanently burned in culture. The Zeitgeist movement clearly doesn't have that type of impact as far as public impression. So having this nonprofit association not only gives legal protection explicitly, especially when the trademarks associated and the like, it's also going to give it fundamental credibility when it comes to talking to people in a more professional setting, if you will. Now, a very detailed and professional video will be made regarding the nonprofit. It will be extremely detailed and clear, planned and scripted, to make sure everything is extremely clear about all the attributes of the nonprofit and how it pertains to the movement and everything else very soon, probably the next couple of weeks after everything is finalized. But I'm going to spend a moment right now just to kind of run through the bare bones of it, because this is, again, an introductory thing. I didn't prepare much for this. I'm just letting everyone know what's happening and what's in store and the benefits of this, and I hope there isn't any hostility or dissonance about this. For example, if you can't trust a small group of dedicated people to help with this allocation, then I don't know how we can trust any of us to do anything, frankly, or how we could ever even trust a future society. So that kind of knee-jerk reaction, I hope, is dissolved immediately. The people that are on the board are the most trusted and dedicated people I've ever met and have been putting forward their own resources for 6-7 years. This is a trust-oriented arrangement. We need a dedicated board for it to be representative to the government, to make it a legal entity. We have to follow these general distinctions. So there's a certain protocol, of course, that happens too as far as voting measures. And again, this is all defined by the government, and which has to be adhered to, or the nonprofit won't exist. It would be revoked. And while I know most people probably understand what a nonprofit legal entity does, just to clarify that, we could go out and take blanket donations for certain administrative tasks. I mean, we have the shirt, which doesn't sell whatsoever. That's been sitting there. All of that goes towards administration, even though it doesn't cover it. But the nonprofit is about tax deduction. So in the domestic United States, there is a tax deduction for giving to the nonprofit. And that's the point, coupled with the fact that it gives legal power and protection, which, again, in this system is important, as unfortunate as all of that is. So let's go through just a core framework of what we're doing here. Starting with the board is not paid for any of its services to the Zeitgeist movement and its functionality. The money that's brought in goes to contract work for whatever medium. It could very well be that someone on the board does contract work, but that is just that contract work that has a particular intent. Most of the time, that's not going to happen. I'm sure I very rarely suspect any of us on the board are going to have any kind of financial association, anything that's being done. It is a volunteer board, so let's make that very clear. Again, if you're familiar with nonprofits, very often a salary is allocated to all of the board members. We are not doing that. Everyone's volunteer. All allocations are going to be done transparently for the input and the output. There will be a clear quarterly report about everything that came in to the fund and everything that was spent out to show what progress has been. The focus, number 3, the focus of the nonprofit is mainly for core administrative work to assure high integrity of all of our websites and event days and general projects, along with assisting things like extending the chapter structures network online to make it easier for new people to really invigorate the chapter structure. And of course, this can all have input as time goes on. It's not some static thing. And press. Press is the biggest one, probably. There's legal attribute that I mentioned, but there's the press thing, and that is really to push the message of the movement into the forefront and force people to pay attention to it. And this climate, as I talked about before, is perfect for the movement to finally reach that stage of maturity. Even though we don't really need to have any respect for the mainstream media, sadly enough, the mainstream media still maintains the name mainstream media, and it has to be dealt with. The solicitation method will be done through the zeitgeistmovement.com, the global site. It's up to any chapter if they want to help with this type of solicitation. A lot of chapters out there have their own minor solicitation for projects. If they feel it interferes, they don't want to do it, there's no pressure whatsoever. We would hope that this can get some legs, because in the end it's going to benefit everyone. As far as things such as Kickstarters or any kind of immediate project thing, this might be feasible for the GRI, the Localized Solutions Project, and the Collaborative Design System, things that are in development and have been in development for some time. I can't count how many emails I've gotten about the Global Redesign Institute and creating this platform. Again, if you're not familiar with it, it's at the end of the Zeitgeist Movement Defined book. It's described in general detail. And I'm too busy trying to survive in my own life. The very idea of me trying to initiate this myself without any type of support is very difficult. Obviously, I want to bring in lots of people that have wanted to donate their programming capacity, but it has to have an overarching apparatus that is dedicated to it for an extensive period of time, making it their full-time job, if you will, to pull it off and get it done. So honestly, I think that's really all that needs to be said right now, and a lot more will be released. An email will be sent out, a video will be created, and it will be, again, a very transparent and hopefully productive thing. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but I think it will work. I know plenty of people come up to me all the time that want to help with fiscal support for certain projects, and once again, I've been the worst when it comes to shutting people down on this issue. So if anyone has any suspicions, because we're dealing with money and all of those things, just remember who you're talking to, or excuse me, who you're listening to, because I have been the first person in every single conversation to describe all the negative attributes of having any kind of monetary association. The main one, if you would like to hear it, is that it creates establishments. Most nonprofits do use a salary structure. They do employ lots of people, and those people rely on the nonprofit, and by extension, they rely on whatever the nonprofit is servicing. Those in certain environmental movements that get large, they are actually gaining their income, even if they're not trying to be corrupt. I'm not saying they are, but it's a psychological problem that happens when you have an institution that is making a living by servicing something that the institution claims to want to get rid of. It's a big cognitive dissonance. And I think that cognitive dissonance is resolved in this approach because the board is not paid, because the type of approaches we are doing are so minimalistic. It's not just some overarching spending thing where we're just going to bring in larger and larger numbers of people and eventually have a Zeitgeist Movement office or anything like that. This is really to perfect the structure that's already in place. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. And James Phillips will be back next week to feature the London Z-Day stuff, which I heard went very, very well. And once again, this stuff will be posted on the social networks, on the website, and through emails, and on YouTube when everything comes forward. All right, everybody, I appreciate you listening, and I hope that was clear, and I'll talk to you all soon.